In this video we are going to have a look at the game between the two tournament leaders. Wesley So with the white pieces against Magnus Carlsen, and the two players have managed to win all their mini matches so far. They have remained unbeaten, and their first two games against each other, they ended peacefully. In a draw, not much action at all, but now it's the Armageddon game. Magnus playing with more than 6 minutes less. So he's down to something like 8.5 minutes against Wesley So, who has 15 minutes. But Wesley So needs to play for a win. He's in a must-win situation and you're going to enjoy it. Let's have a look. Subscribe to the channel and I will show you what's going to happen. E4, C5, knight C3. And after knight C6, knight F3. Tricky move order. It's possible to play knight F6 when you may still get an open Sicilian, but the most common way of playing here is the move E5. Black is trying to take advantage of this move order. White has omitted the opportunity to play this move D4. So Black now tries to control the D4 square with both its pawns, but at the same time he has also weakened the D5 square, which may be used by a minor piece at some point. Very well-known theory. The most common move here is to develop the bishop to E7. But Magnus goes for his favorite pet line with the move G6. He wants to get its bishop to a more active square. In a sense, more active that you're trying to fianchetto the bishop, which helps the king to receive more support. And later on there are plans to play F5. But that's really far away. And White played here the move D3. Black has to be careful because bishop G7 is not a good move here. It does allow the move knight G5. And it's very important that White gets the chance to attack the pawn on F7. And it's only possible now. White has played the move D3. So the bishop protects the knight. There's no time for Black to take the knight on G5. Well, this is opening theory. And Wesley So seems to be very well prepared. Let's have a look. Magnus goes for the move H6, preventing White from playing that move knight G5. White goes H3. Very subtle move, but very interesting also. D6. And look what Wesley So is playing now. He drops back with a knight to H2. That seems to be remarkable, but the plan is actually very simple. After bishop G7, castling kingside, knight F6, White has two possible ways of proceeding here. There's a positional plan to play the move knight G4, when you can try to trade off that knight on F6. When that knight is no longer there, you are able to control the D5 square better with one of your other pieces. But now, instead of going for this positional approach, when you're in a must-win situation, you bring up your F-pawn. This is another typical plan for these positions. You're about to open up the F-file. So the rook is about to join play. Black captures on F4, bishop takes F4, castling kingside. And now the queen comes to D2. So the queen and bishop are hitting the pawn on H6. Big moment for Black. What should Magnus play here? He decided to defend the pawn with its king, which is probably the best move. In another game still, the move G5 was seen, but I don't like making that many pawn moves in front of the king. I think king H7 is a more sensible continuation. And now the knight on H2 has done its job, comes back to F3. Now it's nicely placed in the center, and Magnus goes for the move bishop E6. And it looks as if Black is in time to consolidate its position now, because he's about to go for queen D7, connect the rooks, and everything seems to be fine. But now it's the move of the tournament so far, played by Wesley So. It's knight G5, and this may have come as a huge surprise to Magnus Carlsen, because what's happening here with this knight move, you're giving a check, you're hitting the bishop on E6, Black is forced to take it, and now after bishop takes G5, there isn't an immediate win, but this spin on the knight on F6 is very unpleasant. Black has to find a way to deal with it. Let's see what Magnus did. He played here the move knight E5, trying to trade off the bishop on C4, or after the move queen F2, now White is putting more pressure on the knight which is pinned. The idea of Black here is not to take the bishop on C4, but to drop back with the knight to D7 to protect the other knight on F6. And it looks as if everything is under control. But now, this is the Wesley So we have never seen before. He just goes all out. He's a must-win, and he strikes here with the move E5. That's a brilliant idea. Attacking the knight cannot go away. If you do take the pawn, well, you have to think about how to take it. You can take with the pawn, you can take with the knight. Magnus took with the pawn. That's the right move, because if you do take with the knight, well, there is knight e4 and you're attacking the knight on f6 one more time. This is a really big problem for black as you're about to take there. The problem is that knight takes e4 is not good because, well, you're counter-attacking the queen. Both queens are hanging. Don't take on d8 because of knight takes f2. Black is all right. But the key move is queen h4 with check, intermediate check. The king got to move, and now it's bishop takes d8. White is a queen up. So therefore, back to the game, you cannot take with the knight. You got to keep that knight on d7, supporting the other knight. Therefore, d takes e5, and now the knight comes into e4. That was the plan of the pawn sacrifice. Now, massive pressure against that knight on f6, and a lot of things are happening, and with not much time on the clock, this is not easy to figure out over the board. And Magnus, he played a very natural move. He decided to move the queen away from this diagonal. He played here the move queen b6. It should be said though that a move like bishop f5 is probably even a bit better, but it's not easy at all. The idea is that you're closing the f-file and there's nothing white can do there. Well, there are a lot of crazy lines there, but after queen h4, for instance, king g8, the line may even continue with rook takes f5. I just want to show you what may have happened. I think this was Wesley's intention. If this would have been played, then it's g takes f5 and the knight comes in to g3 with ideas to come to f5, with a lot of ideas to remove the bishop on g7. When the bishop is no longer there, the queen can come in. Very difficult to play in a practical game. Back to what happened in the game. After the move knight e4, queen b6 was played, and it's still okay for black, I think. But it's very dangerous. Queen h4 check. And what are you going to do with that king? You're not going back to g8. That's really bad because it does allow this move. Rook takes f6, eliminating a defender. And there's no good way to take it back with either your bishop or the knight. If you do so, then it's knight takes f6 with check. You have to give up that bishop, but now white recaptures, gaining full control over the dark squares, and it's threatening here to give checkmate on h8. An amazing line, but Magnus had it all clear for himself. He didn't want to go back to g8. He wanted to play here the move knight h5. That's why he moved the queen away from d8. Otherwise the queen would still have been hanging. But with the knight on h5, white can play here the move g4, which was Wesley So his choice. He's attacking the knight, and this is incredibly dangerous. You're a piece down as white, but white is about to regain it, and then the king is just wide open. What should black do? Difficult moment, and you cannot avoid that white is regaining the piece. But you probably should go for this move, f5, with the idea that after taking on h5, you take the knight on e4, and things are absolutely unclear. We are not going to delve too deeply because Magnus also didn't have the time to think here at all. He decided to take on c4, which in fact is also a very human decision, I would say, just to trade off more attackers. So after bishop takes c4, white's not going to recapture, but instead played here this move, g takes h5. That's very important. Now, you're still a piece up as black, but where are you going with the bishop? I mean, you can ignore the bishop and take on h5, but then white is going to take on h5 with check as well. And after moving the king, then you take on c4, and well, the black king is very open, and there are ideas to get the rook involved, to bring the other rook into the game. It's a very dangerous attack. I don't feel comfortable here as black at all. So Magnus, look what he did. He just went back with the bishop. He sticks to the extra piece, but now it's time for knight f6 check. Hitting the king. Black has to take it with a knight, and then it's, look at this, rook takes f6. It's another sacrifice, just an incredible idea when you're attacking the queen, and you got to do something about it. But are you going to take the rook, or are you moving the queen away? That's the big question. Well, let's have a look. If you move the queen, let's say you just take the pawn, Then it's h takes g6 with double check. Now this rook on f6 supports the pawn on g6, which means the king cannot capture it. If the king goes away, it's queen h7 with checkmate. So therefore, you should take the rook. But how should you take it? Well, the most obvious move here is bishop takes f6. But I think Magnus didn't play this move because there would follow h takes g6 again with double check. After king takes g6, this looks so dangerous. Queen h6, the king has to go up the board. King f5, rook f1. With tempo, the rook joins play, and I think most people, when they see this, they would stop looking any further. King has to go back to e6. Rook takes f6 with check. You're getting back all the material. And after king goes to d7, it's rook takes b6. You're winning back the queen. But now it's time to make up the balance here. And we see that it's a rook versus two queens. Things are not that simple. Actually, I would still prefer white because I think the black king is still quite exposed. But it's not clear at all. Well, Magnus didn't like these lines at all and decided to just give up the queen here with the move queen takes f6, bishop takes f6. But then it's just queen versus a rook and a bishop while the attack is still in progress. It's a very bad position. H takes g6 with double check is still a huge threat with a crushing attack. So Magnus played here the move g5. But it's queen takes g5 now. He took the bishop on f6, hoping that he is in time to give a check with a rook on g8 or even pin the queen. But now, beautiful move. Rather than taking back immediately, Wesley So played here this move, queen f5. He's so calm, he just gives a check. And the idea is that if the king goes away, you can just capture the bishop with check, which is even better than capturing immediately. Now, you may go back with the king to g8, but then it's also queen takes f6, and there's no counterplay with the rook. So, in the game, there followed king g7. The king keeps the bishop defended, but now there's h6. With check, you're deflecting the king, and black has to move the king, takes the pawn. Queen takes f6. White has managed to win the piece back. Now, two options for the king. Coming forward or going back. If you go king h5, it's queen takes e5 with check. You're winning the bishop. Therefore, king h7 was played, but now we are just in a really bad endgame for black. It's queen versus rook and bishop, but white can give a bunch of checks. Queen f5, king h6, queen f6, king h7, just repeating the moves. And now king f2. The king goes to the center. The rook is about to join the action. Rook g8, queen h4, check, king g6, rook g1, the king goes to f5, and now another check. The king is nowhere in a safe place to hide. So rook g6, now rooks are coming off the board, and another check is there to hit the king and the bishop at the same time. Bishop e6, only move to avoid the loss of the bishop, but now the pawn on b7 is hanging, and well, white is just completely winning here. Magnus, of course, with an Armageddon game, you just have to continue rook h8, but everything speaks for itself. I mean, white has so many good moves. He attacks the rook, then he makes sure that the black is not able to take all these pawns. a5 played, he plays the move a4, and next part of the plan is to give a number of checks and wrap up these pawns. Let's see how he did it. e4, pawn takes, king takes, queen g6, again double attack, but the bishop can block. Queen c6, now another double attack, hitting the pawn on c5. King d4, and now the move c3. Beautiful idea. The pawn is poisoned, cannot be taken. Because of queen takes c5 with another check, you're winning the bishop. Therefore, the king has to give up the protection of the pawn on c5. King e5 played, queen takes c5, king f6. Now another check on b6, bishop e6. King g2, everything is fine here. I think the idea is that if you do take on h3, well, you can even give up the queen for the bishop and then take the rook. Well, that's one of the many ways to convert the game. Rook e4 played, and now Wesley So creates a new passed pawn with the move b4. Pawn takes, white recaptures, rook check, king goes forward, the rook comes behind, but there's so many possible checks here. Queen d4, queen d3, king e5. Now the a pawn is there. So two connected passed pawns. Bishop d5, Queen, e3 check, king f5, queen d3, king e5. This is torturing. This is so annoying that you repeat the moves when you're just completely winning. That's so frustrating for Magnus. But of course, he has to deal with it. And he deserves to suffer in this game because he is just totally outplayed by Wesley So. Rook g2, king h5, bishop e4, queen c3, king f4. And now, well, it's just a6. The a-pawn is almost promoting here. Magnus just resigned. The position is just too bad. You can play on a few more moves, but it will not change the evaluation and the result of this game. So I think this was a very impressive attacking game. Many attacking players would have been proud of playing such a game against the best player for the last 10 years, Magnus Carlsen. Let me know what you think of this game. Subscribe to the channel and I will cover many more interesting games. Thanks for tuning in. See you later.